Welcome to Oculus of the Wise. I need you to stop whatever is happening around you right now. Not in a second, not after you finish that thought. Right now, close the other tabs. Put down whatever your hands are holding, because what I am about to hand you today was never designed to circulate freely. This is not spiritual content built to make you feel warm for 20 minutes before it dissolves into the noise of everything else you consumed this week. This is a documented account, a report filed in a dimension your eyes cannot access, but your spirit has been reading since before you had the language to describe what it was picking up. And by the time I finish telling you what was recorded, you will understand why this video did not find you yesterday, why it did not find you last month, and why it arrived on your screen at this exact moment in your life, and not a single day sooner. I already know something about you before you tell me anything. You have been carrying something you cannot fully explain, not weight in the ordinary sense, something more specific than that. A frequency, a pull from somewhere deep enough that when you try to describe it to the people closest to you, their eyes shift, not because they do not care, because what you carry does not translate into the language they operate in. You have been doing this alone for longer than anyone should have to. And today, for the first time, someone is going to explain to you exactly why that solitude was not punishment. It was preparation for something that the spiritual record has been building toward since before you drew your first breath. Now let me tell you about a moment that theology has never fully resolved with a satisfying explanation. In the first chapter of Job, the adversary is standing before God, not hiding, not sneaking in, present in an assembly before the throne with authorization to be there. And God, who knows all things, who sees every movement before it happens, asks a question that sounds strange coming from someone who knows everything. Where have you come from? And the answer is from going to and fro on the earth and from walking back and forth on it, going to and fro, walking back and forth, observing, studying, gathering intelligence before acting. This is not an enemy that strikes randomly. This is a being that collects data before making a move, that identifies what has value before attempting to destroy it. And then God does something extraordinary. He mentions Job without being asked. Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one like him on the earth. God introduces Job into the conversation. He puts a target on his own servant, and the question you have probably never stopped to ask is why? Why would God do that? Because God already knew what was inside Job. He knew Job had arrived at a level of spiritual formation that could only be verified through fire. He knew the gold was there, but Job did not know the gold was there, and the only way to prove it was to allow the furnace. Now I need you to let that land, because what came against Job was not a failure of divine protection. It was divine protection operating at a level so far above the visible that it looked like abandonment from the ground, and the same thing happened to you, not metaphorically. Specifically, there was a season in your life, and you know exactly which one I am describing right now without me needing to name it, when the attacks were too coordinated to be coincidence, too precise, too surgically timed. The relationship that collapsed at the exact moment you needed stability, the financial ground that cracked right when you were about to build something that mattered, the health that wavered at the one point where you could not afford to slow down. That was not bad luck. That was not the consequence of poor decisions. That was a coordinated operation from something that identified what you carried before you identified it yourself, and every single calculated move failed. Not because you were perfect, not because you never fell. You fell hard. You stayed on the ground long enough for the floor to start feeling familiar, but something in you, something underneath the exhaustion and underneath the logic that said it was reasonable to stay down, simply would not let go of what it was holding. And that refusal, chosen one, is what changed everything. If what I just described resonates somewhere deeper than your intellect, if a part of you is confirming before your mind has finished evaluating, hit the like button right now. Not as a social media gesture, as a declaration. Because the algorithm that governs what this video reaches is not separate from the system that brought it to you today. And every person who was supposed to hear this needs the signal that you are about to send by pressing that button. Write 777 in the comments if you have ever felt that the opposition in your life was too specific to be random, too organized to be coincidence. As if something had been studying your weak points before deciding exactly when and how to deploy them. And stay until the very end, because the heaviest part of this revelation is not at the beginning. It is sitting at the finish line, waiting for the moment when everything I say before it has built enough foundation for you to feel the actual weight of it. Now I need to show you the specific mechanism by which every attack against you became the raw material for exactly what the attack was trying to prevent. Paul uses a word in Romans 8:28 that most English translations convey accurately, but that loses the texture of the original Greek. The word is synergeo. It means to work together, not in the weak sense of voluntary collaboration, in the technical sense of separate elements producing together a result that neither would produce alone. All things work together for good for those who love God. All things, not the good things, not the comfortable things. All things. And what this means in the practical reality of your life is something that the being assigned against you discovered before you did. Every attack launched against someone whose spirit is genuinely oriented toward the source enters the synergio mechanism. The attack itself becomes part of the process. It is absorbed into the construction. Think of someone trying to destroy a building by throwing bricks at it. The more they throw, the more material the structure has to grow. And there came a specific moment, a moment you did not witness, but that was recorded, when the being assigned against you ran the internal calculation and arrived at a conclusion that had no precedent in its operational history. Everything I have launched has become part of what this person is becoming. Every refined attack generated a layer of depth and resilience that did not exist before I struck. I did not destroy the target. I built it. That is what the spiritual record calls mission collapse. And mission collapse requires formal acknowledgement, not voluntary, mandatory, the same way a confession in a courtroom is not optional once the evidence is presented. The evidence of your life, the fact that you kept getting up after losses that should have been terminal, became the legal basis for a ruling that closed the operation permanently. Not paused. Closed. And I need you to understand the difference, because that difference is why everything around you is about to shift in ways you do not yet have complete language for. But the closing of that operation is not even the most significant thing I have to show you today. There is something else, something that happened simultaneously that operates on a completely different level. You broke a generational decree, not a small one, an ancient one, the kind that had been moving through your bloodline for generations, like an inheritance, nobody asked for and nobody could return. Look back at your family. You do not have to go far. Sometimes one generation is enough. There is a pattern. Maybe it is a pattern of men who leave, fathers who disappear, relationships that collapse at the same structural fault line in every generation, as if the wall keeps being rebuilt with the same crack in its foundation. Maybe it is a poverty pattern, not just financial, the deeper poverty of believing that things are the way they are, and that is just how they will always be. That mentality passing silently from parent to child, like a gene nobody chose. Maybe it is rage. Addiction, choosing the same destructive path over and over, despite the evidence of what happens every time. A script running in the background that no one wrote consciously, but everyone follows. Now look at yourself. Did you repeat it? You got close. There were moments where the pull of the familiar pattern was so strong you could feel it like gravity dragging you toward the same ending your parents and their parents lived. But you are here, awake enough to recognize the pattern, honest enough to name it, present enough to be hearing these words right now. That is not normal for your bloodline. That is an anomaly. And anomalies in bloodlines do not happen by accident. There was a moment. It probably did not feel significant when it happened. A decision you made that seemed small. Something you let go of when you were too tired to hold it anymore. A night you survived in a way you still cannot fully explain. And that quiet, unremarkable moment that your mind has probably almost forgotten sent a signal through the spiritual record that changed the written decree over your family line permanently. You stepped outside the pattern, and when you stepped outside the pattern, the decree built on the pattern became inapplicable. Not because God made a mistake, because free will is so fundamental to the structure of creation that God himself committed to honoring it. Deuteronomy 30:19 states this with a directness that leaves nothing to interpretation. I have set before you life and death. Choose life, not a gentle suggestion. A command issued by someone who knows you have the actual power to choose, and you chose. If you are watching this and you can feel the truth of what I am describing settling into a place deeper than your analytical mind, subscribe to this channel right now and turn on every notification, because what I am building here is not content. It is a record. And the next piece of what was documented about your life will be revealed in a way that requires what you heard today as its foundation. If you are already subscribed, I see you. The fact that you keep showing up here tells me something about who you are that I am going to prove before this video ends. Now I need to show you the third dimension of what happened, because the closing of the dark operation and the breaking of the generational decree were not the full picture. There is something else. Something that most spiritual teaching never addresses, because it requires a depth of understanding about the nature of Jesus that organized religion has spent centuries softening. Isaiah 53 describes him as a man of sorrows acquainted with grief, not an occasional visitor to pain, someone who inhabited it, who understood every texture of it, and a being who carries that weight, who knows human suffering at the deepest possible level, who has witnessed every form of grandeur and wretchedness across the entire span of human existence, is very difficult to surprise. He has seen everything. Genuine faith and religious performance. Love that sacrifices and selfishness. Dressed as love, he knows humanity at the deepest level. And precisely because of that, when something authentic occurs, when a gesture that has no reason to be good is good anyway, it does not go unnoticed. It stands out like a tuned note in a room full of noise. You hear it not because of the volume, but because of the quality. And you have been that note more than once, maybe in moments so small you do not even remember them. A kindness you extended when you were at your worst, a word you chose not to say when anger was pushing you to say it, a hand you opened when you yourself needed someone to extend one to you, something you gave when you had nothing left to spare, gestures no one saw that you did not post anywhere. That generated no visible reward, that you might not even classify as significant because they happened in silence, and silence does not seem important. But silence is exactly the environment where the heaviest gestures occur, because anyone can do good when there is an audience. But the good you do when you are absolutely convinced no one is watching carries a signature that cannot be faked. It cannot be faked because it does not come from strategy. It comes from nature. You did not decide to be good in that moment. You simply were, because it is what you are underneath, everything. And in one of those moments, something moved across the face of the one who carries the weight of all things. A shift that was not calculated. That was not decided. That simply happened as an involuntary response to something that reached a place deeper than words can access. Hebrews 4:15 says he empathizes, present tense, active, not observing from the distance of someone above, entering the experience of someone beside. And a being who can empathize at that depth can also be moved. Not only by the suffering, by the authenticity within the suffering. And what was revealed about you, what emerged when the fire tried to destroy but only managed to expose, was something he had not seen in this exact combination, in this exact measure, in this exact context before. Because the specific combination of who you are, what you endured, what the enduring left in you, and what persisted through all of it, produces something that does not exist anywhere else. There is no copy of what you are. Now I need to show you the concrete evidence that this entire process is already active in your life. The first evidence is that the coordinated attacks stopped without you being able to identify exactly when. They did not stop with a dramatic event. They stopped gradually, like a tide going out. Things are still challenging, but they lost that specific quality of organized pressure coming from every direction simultaneously. That was the closure of the operation being experienced in the natural. The second evidence is the specific clarity that arrived in situations that had been confusing for a long time. Not clarity from more information, clarity from noise being removed, as if the static preventing the signal from coming through simply stopped. You have made recent decisions with a sharpness you did not have in those same areas for years. The third evidence is the specific estrangement inside your own family. If you broke the pattern of your bloodline, there is someone who looks at you with a discomfort neither of you can fully name. Not hostility. The disorientation of watching someone leave the script everyone else was still following. That is not your problem to fix. That is your evidence. The fourth evidence is the loneliness of the one who goes first. Not the loneliness of having no people around you. The loneliness of operating at a frequency that requires constant translation before you can communicate with those who have not crossed the threshold you crossed. You have simplified what you actually thought so you could be understood. You have felt more alone at a gathering than you do when you are completely by yourself. That is not a personality defect. That is a spiritual signature. The fifth evidence is what you are feeling right now as you hear this, something deeper than the intellect, the part of you that recognizes before it processes. That confirms before it analyzes. That says yes while the mind is still evaluating. That recognition is itself the strongest confirmation that what I described is real in your history. Now, I need to tell you what was released the moment the operation closed and the decree broke simultaneously. Because what happens when both of those things occur at once has no common precedent in the spiritual record. Think of a dam. While the dam stood, water accumulated behind it, the pressure grew, the volume grew, but the movement stopped. When the dam is removed, everything held back begins to flow, not gradually, with the accumulated force of the entire period of containment. Joel 2:25 is one of the most direct declarations in all of Scripture. God says he will restore the years the locust has eaten, not restore something equivalent, restore the years themselves. What would have taken years happens in months. What would have taken months happens in weeks, not because God changes the laws of time, because the speed of provision adjusts to match the period of delay. The first thing released is authority of voice. You have been suppressed, not by humility, by the learned belief that speaking brings consequences, that standing out is dangerous, that silence is safer than exposure, that pattern is dissolving right now. You will notice the desire to speak what you see, to share what you learned in the battles, to use the perspective that only exists in someone who walked through what you walked through. Growing in a way you can no longer contain. That is not arrogance, That is authority returning to its original owner. The second thing released is directional clarity. One of the most consistent effects of generational decrees is identity confusion. When you grow up inside a pattern that does not match who you actually are, part of you constantly tries to fit into a shape that was never designed for you. That tension consumed enormous energy. With the decree broken, the confusion dissolves. In the coming weeks, you will experience a precision about who you are and where you are going that you have not felt in years, maybe ever. The third thing released is blocked provision. Decrees of scarcity over bloodlines manifest as patterns of self-sabotage, getting close enough to sufficiency to destroy it, receiving and not being able to hold. That pattern has lost its root. What used to slip away begins to stay. What used to be blocked begins to open. The fourth thing released is your impact on those still inside the fire. That is what happened with Job. After his restoration, he became the intercessor for those who judged him during his loss. You have people around you right now who are in battles you already walked through, who are at the point where they cannot yet see the other side. Your presence on the other side of the operation, with the perspective of someone who saw the complete process, is exactly what those people need. Not theory, living evidence. I need to warn you about something that will happen in the coming weeks. When an operation closes and a decree breaks simultaneously, there is a specific testing period, not a new attack, a verification. The enemy sends situations that look like the old patterns to see if your response will be the old response. The difference is that this time, the correct response is not resistance. It is recognition without reactivity. You will notice the pattern, you will recognize where it comes from, and you will respond not as someone fighting for survival, but as someone who already knows the outcome. Nehemiah knew this. When his opponents tried to pull him away from building the walls of Jerusalem, he responded with words that should become your personal declaration. I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you? That is your response to anything that arrives disguised as urgency in the coming days. You are doing a great work. You do not need to come down. Now, let me tell you what is written in your file, not what was written before, what is written now. First, new entry, coordinated suppression operation closed due to complete mission failure and simultaneous generational decree reversal. This combination is among the rarest entries the spiritual record carries. The being assigned against you did not leave because you escaped. It left because you became what it was trying to prevent, and the decree over your bloodline did not expire on a timer. It broke against you specifically because your nature simply did not fit what the decree was written for. Second new entry, intercessory authority over bloodline pattern confirmed. You now carry the capacity to pray for, intercede for, and stand on behalf of family members still inside the cycle you exited. Your intercession has access from the inside, not from the outside looking in. Third, new entry, testimony of persistence under maximum pressure, recorded as legal evidence in the celestial court. What you lived will not disappear when the chapter turns. It remains as the permanent foundation of everything built after it. Fourth new entry, accelerated restoration initiated. Joel 2:25 is being executed over your timeline. The speed of what moves toward you from this moment forward does not correspond to normal pace. It corresponds to the length of what was held back. And the length of what was held back in your case was significant. One final thing, in the spiritual record, when a dark operation collapses against a human target, that collapse does not only enter your file, it enters the record of every person who will face the same strategy, because collapse establishes precedent, and precedent has a protective function over those who come after you. What you went through was never only about you, it was about everyone who will still face what you faced. And when you share what happened, when you name the process, When you put into words what you lived, you create testimony that carries legal weight in the record that shields the next person walking the same path you walked. Share this video right now with someone you know is still in the middle of the fire. Someone who needs to hear that the fire they are sitting in is not destroying them. It is revealing something about them that nothing else could expose. Someone who needs to know that persistence has a record and that the record carries weight that outlasts the pain. If everything you heard today confirms something that was already alive inside you, write 777 in the comments as a declaration that you recognize what happened in your history and that you accept the positioning of someone who came through the fire carrying evidence that the fire was never the end of the story. Subscribe to this channel and turn on every notification, because what comes next will reveal the specific dimensions of what was unlocked in your life that you still do not have complete words for. Before you go, click on the video appearing on your screen right now, because what I show you there is the next layer of what gets released after an operation closes and a decree breaks at the same time. And how you move in the first 30 days of this new season determines how fast everything held back arrives in your daily life. Together, we are stronger.